here is his mother, Catherine Gordon. When his parents married, his father agreed that he could take Gordon, which was his mother's name, family name, because there were no sons anywhere in the family. So this was going to be the male child from his mother's side. So therefore, the father said, okay, that's fine. So he was christened as George Gordon. Now, he wasn't a lord yet. So here is his mother, Catherine Gordon, from the Castle of Guyt in Scotland. The little inset on the map of Scotland shows you where it is. It's way, way up at the top, way up in that top corner on a peninsula that juts out into the North Sea. And so presumably, if you met her in 1785 or so, you assume she was a Scottish heiress. In our picture, she's very lovely, and I'm sure that when her husband, Mad Jack, that was his nickname, when John Byron met her, I'm sure that he was impressed and thought, oh, this is a Scottish heiress. So that was probably the impression they all had. Later in her life, and particularly by the time her son became famous, she gained weight. And Catherine's life was not really a happy one, although, of course, she had the one delight of having this son. Here is the second parent, Mad Jack Byron, Captain John Byron. He was the black sheep in this family of the Byrons. And on our chart, you can see him. He's over there on the left side. There's a yellow arrow pointing to him. What's important is that his father was the 6th Lord Byron. Now, he would not have been expected to inherit, and so he was on the search for an heiress. By 1785, when he was 30, he had already been married. If you see the little piece on him up there, he'd already been married once, and he had a daughter, Augusta. You see, and in the thing, there's his daughter, there's his son George, and there's his daughter Augusta. So he'd already been married before. Now he was remarrying, and so he and Catherine came to Bath, not to take a bath, but to just take the waters, to take the mineral waters at Bath. As you know, this is now a 2,000-year-old Roman bath building that stands. Roman buildings still stand. But in the 18th century, this was one of the premier mineral baths that you went to. And of course, people went there mainly to meet other people. They didn't really care about the bath or the waters or anything. It was just an excuse to get away from your parents and hustle somebody down at the baths. And so Catherine, who was, getting older and still single and getting worried about being single, went off to Bath with a friend, and there at the mineral baths met Mad Jack. And Mad Jack was definitely on the hunt for a rich heiress of some kind, and met Catherine. She was very sweet, very, very, very innocent, no knowledge whatsoever of the worlds of romance. And so Catherine was very innocent and swept off her feet by Mad Jack. You can imagine. Mad Jack had lived everywhere, so he had gambled everywhere, lost everywhere, and needed money. And so in order to feed his gambling, he needed an heiress who could provide him with money. He saw Catherine, he spied her, he grabbed her, and he never let go. And so they got married. I think they married in London, if I recall. And so now they went off to Scotland to claim the pot of gold that he expected. And they went off to Aberdeen. Here on our map of England, there's a little inset with Scotland, and you can see Aberdeen is way up there in the top north. It's not Edinburgh. Edinburgh is fairly sophisticated and charming. Aberdeen is way far even more north than that. It's on the water, has a little river. And, of course, he was hoping that they had some beautiful castle, some beautiful, wealth that they were inheriting, when, in fact, of course, once he got to Aberdeen, this is present-day Aberdeen on the river there, when they got to Aberdeen, he discovered there wasn't much money at all. And Catherine didn't have access to hardly any of it right then. Her parents were still alive, and they were living on a very limited amount of money. Scottish nobility with no money, with a rundown castle out in the countryside, but no money. So Mad Jack was greatly disappointed, and as soon as he could come up with an excuse, left poor Catherine there, 54 Broad Street, Aberdeen, Scotland. That's a picture of 19th century Broad Street, and I think she was in that rental there, 3 windows in the front. So there they were living in Aberdeen, Scotland, with Mad Jack off on trips to France, to Deauville, Saint-Tropez, other places where there was gambling. And Mad Jack would go to these places and gamble all the money away that Catherine had managed to squeeze out of her parents and pass to him because, of course, he had some emergency, so she would give him his money. And then he would disappear, go off with the money, gamble it all away, lose it all, and then come back. Then he would reappear in Aberdeen and kissy coo, and, Kate this and Kate that, and oops, oh, by the way, I need some money. So then she would go and try and dig out some more, and her friends all told her, don't give him any more money. And so he did settle down, but I love this little detail. He rented an apartment down the street. Do you love that? Is that the best thing I could tell you so far? I mean, he rented an apartment down the street. Does that tell you everything? Don't you think his wife must have said, honey, why do you need an apartment down the street? I love to have you here with me in my Betty Bye. No, he rented an apartment down the street. You can bet why he rented the apartment down the street. So he could go, fooling around at night. In any case, the money kept coming, money kept coming, and then in 1788, the little boy appeared. And Mad Jack would go off with her money. And their friends all told her, don't give him any more money, don't give him any more money. And, of course, she did. She just kept ladling out the money, and he would disappear, and so she raised little Georgie with the help of her Scottish nurse, Mary Gray. They all called her May. Mary Gray called May. And so she and May and little Georgie now were growing up this circle in this little house in Aberdeen. Then Mad Jack, eventually getting no money, went off and deserted them and disappeared. And so I think he died in 1795. In the later years, 96 and 7 and 8, when Georgie was about to be 10, he's born in 1788, so 1798, he's 10 years old. And in 1798, the last Lord Byron died, the 6th Lord Byron, and everybody else in the family was either female or dead. And so the title passed down through unexpectedly. Nobody knew this. It all happened very quickly, but it passed through. Of course, his own father was dead, so it's probable that John could have inherited at that point, but he was dead. So then it passed down to George Gordon, and he became the 6th Lord Gordon in 1798. And so 10 years old, having lived through a very, very insular, isolated life with his mother, over, just the two of them and May, their nurse, in Scotland. And now, all of a sudden, in 1798, little George Gordon was Lord Byron, and the three of them packed up in Scotland and made this journey to this place they'd never seen, had never been there, made this journey to Newstead Abbey, which was now his. Now just imagine this. Overnight, these impoverished Scottish nobility, little family living in downtown Aberdeen, overnight is informed, you are the new Lord Byron. They had no idea what any of this meant yet, but they were told, get in your carriage and come. And so here they arrived on the great big huge long driveway, 3,200 acres, 16 farms, and Catherine had almost no cash. She had 150 pounds a year, which is a minuscule income. Just imagine what this was to this boy and what it meant. That overnight he went from being a provincial impoverished kid in Scotland to a noble lord, a member of the House of Lords. Remember, when he was 21, he was going to enter the House of Lords and make his maiden speech in Parliament. So he was not only nobility, but he was also powerful. He was going to be in Parliament in the 18th century. Lords were in the House of Lords. He was going to be a lord, and he would have a political future. So all during the next 10 years, as he's growing up, people are meeting him and talking to him and thinking, well, that could be a Prime Minister of England someday. So there is Newstead Abbey. Imagine what this was to this boy who was intellectually brilliant, but nobody knew that yet, except his mother. And now, not only was he not impoverished and not from the Scottish provinces, but he was also important and going to be someday in Parliament. Here's a picture of Newstead Abbey now. What they inherited, of course, was the ruins of Newstead Abbey, as was in other places in England. Abbeys that had been closed down by Henry VIII maybe fell into ruin, maybe church buildings fell into ruin, but still was an ample property, and so Newstead Abbey was a great property, 3,200 acres, you can imagine. Beautiful gardens, of course, and so those are all preserved. The old tower, the old bell tower next to the church is there. Some of it was not useful to them, and they couldn't inhabit some of it, but a lot of it they could, so they went to work and began fixing it up. The main building hadn't been occupied when they moved in. There were other places that the previous lords had lived. But